What? Bronze. Hey. Got Bronze on the beat.
Bronze. Creator gang gang.
Hey. Let's go.
Welcome to the Jehovih Chronicles with your host, Cosmon Cal.
Right, it's your hostess with the most, just holding that fire like a roach clip. Cosmon Cal, your noggin, your nerve fresh off of that curve jelly jam and preserve. Hey, I was just thinking, right? They be lying about everything else, right? And since we ain't never seen a white aboriginal, right? My thought was, could the Moor be the aboriginal European? What if they're conflating the fact that he's even North African only because he's Muslim? What if the aboriginal European is melanated? Right? Now we've seen things to go to prove this narrative, like for instance, Cheddar Man, right? Cheddar Man. Let me go see. How do I? Let me see if I can move this down a little bit, y'all. Okay. And we could just pull this up like real quick. Cheddar Man. All right. Here is the face of the earliest known Aboriginal European. Booyah. That is what the Aboriginal European looked like. Heavily melanated. More to a, straight type of hair. Was still at this time black. Heavily melanated with the blue eyes. That's Cheddar Man. That's the earliest found European so far. This about 8,000, 6,000 BC. So that's what a European looks like. So if it is that you are indoctrinating the world and writing your own version of history, backdating events and writing yourselves into history, whitewashing history, and doing a whole iconoclastic way of just living. You know what I mean? Just usurpage is, would be, they should literally call you the usurper. Funny. Ain't that what Jacob mean? What if Jacob is the European? He just looked at like this. Now they give you this wild story about Moors when Moors is just really melanated Europeans, irregardless to whatever religion they had. But the ones that came in power kicking butt for a couple hundred years, these the ones get remembered, right? And because they tied to Islam, Well, now all Moors must be, they have to be from Africa. When we know for a fact there's melanated men all around the world everywhere. That don't make them African. Just like every so-called black today ain't an African. Every so-called black ain't a nigga. Same thing. Let it sink in. Just want to drop this video real quick. Shout out to the black journals. You dig what I'm talking about? Let's get into some of this, what I like to call Aboriginal European history. Huh? They always want to put it in Africa. Huh? But what about the Europeans that was melanated too? Let's go.
For centuries, the influence of Black Africans in European history has been ignored or erased, despite clear evidence. We've been taught a version of history that suggests Europe was built by Europeans alone, but the proof of Black influence is everywhere. Greek vases with African warriors, medieval churches with Black saints, and noble families incorporating African figures into their emblems. To no surprise, many people have no idea about this legacy. History has been rewritten to make it seem as though Africa and Europe had little to do with each other. The truth has been buried under layers of Eurocentric narratives that cast Africa as a passive land waiting to be discovered, rather than an active force shaping global civilizations. But the evidence has always been there, hiding in plain sight. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So join us.
My bad, y'all.
Today as we explore the Black African presence in European history and the striking facts and images from ancient Europe that historians and institutions tried to hide for so long. Give this video a like to show your support. And let's begin. Moving back to antiquity, Greek art and literature from as early as the 6th century BCE provide some of the earliest European depictions of Africans. Unlike the stereotypical portrayals that emerged in later centuries, these early representations often carried respect and admiration. The Greeks, who had extensive contact with Egypt and other African civilizations, incorporated African figures into their pottery, sculptures, and writings. One such example is the Janiform oil vessel, created between 525 and 475 BCE, which presents an African man and a Greek woman in a two-faced design. This artifact alone already shows how much Africans were acknowledged by the Greeks at the time, as it reflects an artistic fascination with ethnic diversity and cross-cultural interactions. Similarly, the pitcher in the form of the head of an African, dating to around 510 BCE, was crafted in the shape of an African man's head, showing how the Greeks admired Africans in their art. Another notable example is the Attic white ground alabastron, dating from approximately 480 BCE, which depicts an African figure dressed in distinct attire that shows the everyday presence of Africans in Greek life. And beyond everyday objects, Greek artists captured Africans in mythological and historical narratives. The black figure Hydria, depicting Heracles and Busiris from around 510 BCE, portrays the myth of Heracles battling the Egyptian king Busiris. Another significant artifact is the Arcesilas cup, painted between 565 to 560 BCE by the Laconian artist known as the Arcesilas painter. This kylix, or drinking cup, features King Arcesilaus II of Cyrene, overseeing the weighing and packing of goods, including African traders involved in commerce.
Europe.
It reinforces the economic and trade connections.
This is Europe. I want you to dodge the hijack, right? Just because they're saying these brown people in Europe have to be from Africa doesn't mean that they are. Why? How do we know? We just showed you Cheddar Man. We showed you the original European. One more time. That's the original European. Huh? That's Cheddar Man right there. Huh? So we know that the European is already brown. This is just 6,000 BC. Owaspy say they was primarily like that all the way to the fall of Egypt. Ooh.
Between Greece and Africa, a reality often overlooked in mainstream narratives. These artifacts show that Africans lived, worked, and contributed to ancient Greek society in many meaningful ways. They appear in art as traders, warriors, and cultural figures, depicted with striking realism that reflects their presence in daily life. Ancient writers also confirmed what these images show. The historian Herodotus, known as the father of history, didn't describe Ethiopians as mere foreigners. He called them the most handsome of men and wrote about their advanced customs and formidable strength. He recorded that the Persian king Cambyses II attempted to invade their lands and failed. The Greeks knew Africa was a...
Now, Cambyses was a Persian, a forefather of Xerxes, you dig what I'm talking about? Listen, this is what I'm telling you. Cambyses and the Persians are Negroes, not Africans. Remember, all blacks ain't niggas. All blacks ain't Africans. Guess what? Some blacks are European. Indians, darker than any nigga in America, right? East Indians, darker than any nigga in America. They're not black, nor are they negroidal. But they heavily melanated. So just because they melanated, right, and the term Moor gets applied to dark people in Europe, don't mean that they African. I just want you to look at it another way, right? We know they lie about everything. Let's look at the truth of the situation.
It's a land of power and influence. They learned from it. They respected it. And they borrowed from its knowledge. Then came Rome, and with it, a continuation of Africa's presence in European history. If the Greeks acknowledged Africa's role in their world, the Romans made it impossible to ignore. African traders moved through the empire, their goods fueling the Roman economy, and African soldiers not only fought and died for Rome, but also rose through the ranks to lead legions. The Roman military was one of the...
Yeah, right? And we understand that, but let's not act like Africa didn't have a major role. First of all, it fed the world over there, right? Africa was especially Egypt was the bread basket of the world over there. It fed Rome. It fed Greece. Without Egypt, you couldn't leave. This is why everybody was trying to come get it. You dig what I'm saying? So don't let them fool you. You dig what I'm talking about? Like you just needed. You dig what I'm talking about, them? But you dig what I'm saying? At the same time, listen, they couldn't have did it without Africa. As a matter of fact, Africans saved Europeans 3 times. Brought them out the Dark Ages 3 times. 4, really. But you dig what I'm saying? It is what it is, right? But that don't, just because Africans was coming there, don't mean that the only people there that was brown was Africans. We got to dodge the hijack. The European already brown.
The most disciplined forces in history, and among its elite commanders stood Lucius Quietus, a Moorish general who fought for Emperor Trajan. His victories in battle were so impressive that he was considered as a possible successor to the emperor himself. Let that sink in. An African general on the brink of ruling the greatest empire of its time. But how often is his name mentioned in classrooms? How many people even know?
Did you know that you can have permanent teeth in just 24 hours? That's right. Only 24 hours and your new smile is...
Oh, he existed. Quietus's rise was so remarkable that it became a threat. He was chosen by Emperor Trajan as his successor. but Rome's elite refused to accept it. When Trajan died, a Roman senator named Hadrian ignored his wishes, seized power, and ordered Quietus's assassination to eliminate any challenge to his rule. But Quietus wasn't the only one silenced. The Legio IX Hispana, one of Rome's most powerful legions, reportedly sided with him against Hadrian. For that, they too vanished from history. After the tragic tale of Quietus, there was Septimius Severus, a black emperor born in Leptis Magna, in what is now Libya. Unlike Quietus, Severus successfully seized power after the empire fell into chaos, following the assassination of Emperor Commodus in 192 CE. He defeated his rivals in a brutal civil war and emerged as the sole ruler of Rome. From 193 to 211 CE, he strengthened Rome's borders, reshaped its military, and cemented his authority. Yet mainstream history barely acknowledges that an African sat on the throne of Rome. His son Caracalla followed in his footsteps, leaving behind monuments that still stand today. More African emperors followed. Marcus Opellius Macrinus, a Roman of North African descent, became emperor in 217 CE after orchestrating Caracalla's assassination.
That's from the new movie. This is told you this stuff be historical, right? They write. So just like you know, if we weren't in the time right now, they would have showed Macrinus as being a white man, right? Now we got to look at Maximus again. Got to look at Maximus again. These are historical characters. This your boy Macrinus. He had about a 2-year run where he was that guy. If y'all ain't seen the new Gladiator film, this is where this footage is being pulled from, and you can tell by the earrings. See the earrings he has on? He has on 2, right? He comes from Mauritanian or Tunisian stock. What they would have called back then, they would have called it Carthage. He'd have been Carthaginian, right? He has the 2 earrings in his ear to show his status in Rome, right? He's a Roman citizen, but he come from he earned his spot in Rome, right? He wasn't birthed into super mega rich family. He earned his spot. You dig what I'm talking about? He worked for Rome, so that you could tell he Carthaginian. So they showed him like a real Carthaginian would have looked, right? But when you get to looking at a lot of these boys, huh? When you get to looking at a lot of them, they sure be having some strong features, rather curly hair. Anybody ever seen a mixed baby?
Nation. And Emilianus, born in modern-day Tunisia, took the throne in 250.
Emilianus, they know he a nigga. Hair curling. Maybe they couldn't hide everything. Maybe they couldn't hide it all.
53 CE, after leading a successful military campaign. All of these Africans ruled as emperors of Rome, not as mere footnotes in history. Their reigns destroy the notion that Rome was a purely European empire. Despite all this, the African presence in ancient Europe has been systematically erased. The colonial era reshaped the way history was told, stripping Africa of its contributions to civilization. Their goal was evident: justify slavery, justify conquest, justify oppression. To do that, they had to pretend Africa was a place of darkness, untouched by progress, until Europeans arrived to civilize it. But the truth never disappeared. The artwork, the writings, the ruins, they still stand as undeniable proof of Africa's deep connection to European history. By the time we reach the Middle Ages, the African presence in Europe becomes even harder to deny. And yet, history has done its best to erase or distort the story of the Moors. For nearly 800 years, the Moors ruled over vast territories in what is now Spain and Portugal, leaving behind a civilization that transformed Europe. Unfortunately, the idea of black and North African rulers in Europe was erased because those who invented racist hierarchies couldn't stand the truth. So instead of acknowledging the Moors as the architects of Spain's golden age, history has branded them as invaders and erased the reality of what they built. The very word Moor tells us a lot about how their identity has been manipulated. The term comes from the Latin Maurus, which means dark or black. When the Moors arrived in Spain in 711 AD, they were a diverse people, including Berbers from North Africa, Arabs from the Middle East, and sub-Saharan Africans. Historical accounts confirm that many of the Moors had dark skin, and their depictions in medieval European art reflect this.
Okay, so my question is, you was there 700 years. First of all, just because the people who are coming in are brown, don't disqualify the people who are already there being brown. Gotta remember what we talking about, right? I don't want nobody to get triggered over Africa and all that stuff. You dig what I'm talking about? A lot of people hear the word Africa, and now that they, figured out that they Aboriginal, they trying to close that part of history off and then bring Africa over here. No, that's a great folly too. Leave it where it's at. But this begs to ask the question, who birthed the European? Is he who they say he is? Right? If he could just as well be African, he could just as well be American. The Americans are brown too. Just saying.
Yet, over time, efforts to Europeanize history have led many to downplay their African origins, describing them only as Muslim invaders, rather than acknowledging their complex
Did you hear my
makeup.
song?
But contrary to how they've been depicted, the Moors...
Did y'all see it? Watch this. I'm going to run it back. Watch. Look what the brother said. What? Hold on. They just described a different type of African, but said the African was in Europe. Watch. It be double talk. You got to catch it.
When the Moors arrived in Spain in 711 AD, they were a diverse people, including Berbers from North Africa, Arabs from the Middle East, and sub-Saharan Africans. Historical accounts confirm that many of the Moors had dark skin, and their depictions in medieval European art reflect this. Yet, over time, efforts to Europeanize history have led many to downplay their African origins, describing them only as Muslim invaders, rather than acknowledging their complex ethnic makeup. But contrary to how they've been depicted, the Moors did not simply conquer Spain. They built a civilization that was centuries ahead of its time. British historian Basil Davidson, a preeminent scholar of African history, declared that throughout Europe in the 8th century AD, no lands were more admired by their neighbors or more comfortable to live in than the rich African civilization that took shape in Spain. At a point when much of Christian Europe was trapped in feudalism and widespread illiteracy, the Moors established cities that became centers of knowledge, science, and innovation. Córdoba, the capital of Moorish Spain, was the largest and most advanced city in Europe, with paved streets, streetlights, hospitals, and public baths. The Moors created public libraries filled with thousands of books, while in the rest of Europe, even kings and nobles often lacked access to written knowledge. They were able to preserve ancient Greek and Roman texts, while also making breakthroughs in medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, which later contributed to the European Renaissance, and their contributions to medicine were groundbreaking. One of the most influential Moorish scholars was al-Zahrawi, a physician whose work on surgery remained the leading medical textbook in Europe for centuries. He introduced over 200 surgical instruments, many of which are still in use today. His writings on childbirth, dental procedures, and the treatment of fractures set a standard that European doctors would follow long after the Moors were gone. Mathematics was another field where the Moors left an undeniable mark. The cumbersome Roman numeral system was replaced by the Arabic numeral system, introduced to Spain by the Moors. This shift made calculations easier and paved the way for the scientific advancements of the Renaissance. Algebra, a term derived from the Arabic al-Jabr, was refined and developed under Moorish scholars. They also introduced the concept of zero, which revolutionized mathematics and commerce. The Moors reshaped European agriculture as well. Their irrigation techniques, brought from North Africa and the Middle East, transformed the dry landscapes of Spain into fertile farmland. They introduced new crops such as oranges, lemons, peaches, apricots, figs, sugarcane, and rice, many of which are still essential to Spanish cuisine today. They built vast irrigation networks, including underground water channels and aqueducts that allowed cities to thrive in ways previously impossible. Despite these achievements, the Moors faced increasing hostility as Christian kingdoms sought to reclaim Spain. The Reconquista, a centuries-long campaign to drive out Muslim rulers, was framed as a holy war. By 1492, when the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella captured Granada, the last Moorish stronghold, what followed was a systematic effort to erase the Moorish legacy. Libraries were burned, scholars were expelled or forced to convert, and architecture was repurposed to fit Christian rule. Moorish buildings, with their intricate designs and geometric patterns, were either destroyed or Christianized, with crosses replacing Islamic calligraphy and minarets converted into bell towers. This erasure was driven by more than the goal of reclaiming land. It was a deliberate effort to control history. The idea of a brilliant, advanced African-led civilization in medieval Europe didn't fit with the emerging ideas of racial superiority that they would later use to justify colonization and slavery. So the Moors, once celebrated for their knowledge and leadership, were reduced in European history to little more than a foreign enemy. Their influence, however, never truly disappeared. The architecture of Spain, the agricultural techniques still in use, the scientific texts that shaped European thought, all of it remains proof of the civilization built under their rule. No matter how much information has been suppressed, no one can really hide the fact that the Moors were brilliant rulers, scholars, engineers, and architects who left a legacy that Europe still benefits from today. And that is exactly why white history tried to forget them. But try as they may, the black presence in Europe can't be completely erased. For centuries, African figures appeared in the coats of arms of European noble families, yet most people today have no idea why. Heraldry, the practice of designing and displaying coats of arms, was a way for noble families to showcase their ancestry, victories, and alliances. Within this tradition, African figures were not just common, but highly honored. One striking example is the coat of arms of Aragon, which prominently features multiple black Moorish heads. This emblem is tied to the Reconquista, specifically the Battle of Alcaraz in 1096, where King Peter I of Aragon reportedly defeated Muslim forces. The four Moors in the coat of arms are said to represent the fallen Muslim leaders from that battle. The Kingdom of Aragon was a dominant force in medieval Spanish history. So this raises an undeniable question. If Africans had no place in European nobility, why did one of the most powerful kingdoms in Spain display them so prominently on its crest? Spain had been under Moorish rule for centuries, and even after their expulsion, noble families continued to honor this connection. But the black presence in European heraldry was not limited to Spain. In Germany, the Archbishopric of Freising has featured a crowned Moor's head on its coat of arms since at least 1284. While the exact origin of this symbol is debated, this emblem became widely recognized and was even incorporated into the personal coat of arms of Pope Benedict XVI. during his tenure as Archbishop of Munich and
Right.
Freising.
He's
Official records suggest that the symbol originally portrayed
yes, the Berber is the North African that they're trying to tie into, that they're also, but then he can't be that because he's also, we know the Berber comes from the Arabian Peninsula. So he can't be the original North African you're talking about. And then we know for a fact there is no place on this earth called sub-Saharan. That is a social construct created by eugenists and Darwinists. There is no place on any map that anybody uses the word sub-Saharan because it is in fact not a real place. It's an ideology. So we got to question all this stuff. But then we still gonna ask the question, well, where did the European come from? Cosmon, if you saying that he already brown, but he ain't African, where he come from?
a noble African ally or leader who had a significant influence on the region's history. Further south, the Kingdom of Sardinia maintained a strong connection to its Moorish past through its own Four Moors emblem. This symbol is believed to have originated in the 14th century under the rule of the Crown of Aragon, which controlled Sardinia at the time. Its design, which appears on the flag of Sardinia, originally depicted four blindfolded black heads, a representation tied to victories over Muslim forces. Over time, modifications were made, and in 1999, the regional government adjusted it to remove the blindfolds and reposition them as headbands. Similarly, the island of Corsica has long used the Moor's head emblem, known as the Bandera Testa Mora, a symbol that has remained central to its identity despite variations in depiction over the centuries. But as racial attitudes in Europe changed over time, the original meaning of many of these symbols was deliberately erased.
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I afforded this car.
Deliberately
Okay, you ready?
erased.
All right.
Raised. Symbols that once the original meaning of many of these symbols was deliberately erased. Symbols that once recognized African influence and European power were gradually reinterpreted as mere decoration. Others were given misleading explanations, with some being reframed as representations of the defeat of the Moors, rather than acknowledging any genuine historical connection. By the 18th and 19th centuries, as racial ideologies became more entrenched in European thought, the reinterpretation of these symbols grew increasingly deliberate. Many heraldic emblems were modified or reimagined to align with shifting social narratives. Some coats of arms that once featured noble black figures were altered in later depictions, with their skin tones lightened to downplay their African heritage. The heraldry of Aragon, for instance, historically featured four black Moorish heads. However, over time, their depiction was sometimes modified to reduce or obscure any noble or dignified representation of African figures. The coat of arms of Coburg, a German city, originally displayed a clearly African figure. However, in 1934, the government forbade any glorification of the African race, and they replaced the coat of arms with one depicting a vertical sword with a swastika on the pommel. Fortunately, the original coat of arms was restored in 1945 at the end of World War II. But similar distortions occurred elsewhere. The heraldic depictions of Saint Maurice, a revered Roman soldier of African descent who became the patron saint of the Holy Roman Empire, were gradually modified. Earlier images from medieval times clearly portrayed him with African features, but many later representations softened or erased those characteristics.
I'm gonna do a build on y'all see this this armor, right? And the staffs and all this. What if they were used this way to shield the man from electric attacks? What I'm saying is, what if the whole system is a mechanized suit that runs on current? Think about it. Banging steel against steel. You dig what I'm saying? Boom, boom, boom with these big ass swords. How do you hurt this person? But if you got electricity charging up out of this sword, charging up out of this spear, you dig what I'm talking about? It hit a little different. Because, you know, we seen some of these dudes, you know, you put that helmet on, you like a tank. Well, then, you dig what I'm talking about? And a lot of this stuff, stop muskets, bullets, arrows, couldn't do nothing with it. You could chop at it with a sword, nigga still gonna come back, hit you, boom, boom, hit you. He's still gonna hit you. That's why he got armor, he got plating on. But this stuff is meant to fight in. But what if we missing the most important part? And that is that the air is ionized or electrified. And they fought outside these castles that produce this DC current. I'm going to do a build on that. I've been thinking about that. But let's get back to these people in Europe already be brown, because if that's so, well, then the Moor is the indigenous European. Question, Cosmon, where did these brown people from Europe come from?
Entirely, making him appear more European. Over and over, the black presence in history was downplayed, while white figures took credit for achievements in power and innovation. That's why we must keep in mind that history is not just about what is remembered. It's also about what has been erased. The systematic removal of African contributions to European civilization wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate act, carried out over centuries to serve a political agenda. The reality of Africans in ancient Greece and Rome, the rule of the Moors in Spain, and the noble African figures immortalized in European heraldry all challenged the racial hierarchies that colonial powers wanted to impose. If Africa had once been home to powerful civilizations that influenced Europe, then the justification for colonization and the transatlantic slave trade fell apart. So in order to maintain control, Europe rewrote the history that connected Africa to the very foundations of human progress. Textbooks were rewritten to exclude African contributions, making sure that generations of students in both Europe and Africa were taught a Eurocentric version of history. Museums displayed
Captain, there are still 9 orders.
artifacts from contributions, making sure that generations of students in both Europe and Africa were taught a Eurocentric version of history. Museums displayed artifacts from Africa without context, stripping them of their historical significance. Art was misinterpreted, with black figures in medieval European paintings explained away as symbolic rather than reflective of real African individuals who lived, traded, and held power in Europe. Even language was manipulated. Terms like Moors and Ethiopians, once understood to include black Africans, were gradually redefined to distance them from their original racial and cultural meanings. The consequences of this erasure are still felt today. Most people, even those who study history, are unaware of the deep connections between Africa and Europe in the ancient and medieval worlds. The false notion that Africa was always separate from European progress remains deeply ingrained. It's a carefully constructed lie, one designed to maintain racial hierarchies and justify the exploitation of African people and resources. But despite the efforts to erase these truths, History has a way of preserving itself. The evidence never truly disappeared. It exists in the artwork, in the architecture, in the family crests of noble European houses. It's there in the writings of ancient historians and in the ruins of Moorish palaces in Spain. No matter how much history was distorted, the truth was never fully erased. It only waits to be rediscovered. Now, as more scholars, researchers, and everyday people begin to challenge these long-standing historical distortions, the story of Africa's role in European civilization is coming back into the light. The truth is undeniable. The only question is, are people ready to accept it? If this challenged what you thought you knew, don't stop here. Keep questioning, keep researching, and keep these conversations going. History is full of stories that have been buried, rewritten, or forgotten, but together, we can bring them back into the light. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. What other historical topics should we explore? Let's keep learning from the past so we can better understand the present. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.
All right. But remember, I asked you to keep a question in mind. Cosmo, if you saying, you know they think I'm crazy anyway. Cosmo, are you saying, right, that these people aren't African? I'm saying they don't have to be brown. Well, Cosmo, who, if they not African, where do these people come from? I offer you up a different point of view, right? Let me share this with you, right? This is from the book. Hold on. Let's go back. Let's blow this up so everybody can see it. Everybody see I ain't capping. Right? Hold on. Dang it. This is from the book, The Algonquin Conquest of the Mediterranean Region of 11,500 years ago. Oh, I know. I know. Not what you thought. They never even gave you an inkling that they could have been brown because they came from America. Well, Americans are the copper-colored races found there by Europeans. But did you know the Algonquins conquested the area 9,500 BC, right after meltwater post B1, right, when there was a great release of water in the Americas that would have displaced millions of people. Where'd they go? To the Mediterranean. Come on, Cosmo. You doing too much. Huh? They always trying to downplay the greatness of Guatemala. While everybody else was getting bombed out in the world, we was still cracking. But let's just go see, and this is his theory. Y'all go get the book. I'll drop the link in the chat for this to where y'all can go get this. But y'all can, it's a free PDF called the Algonquin Conquest of the Mediterranean Region of 11,500 years ago. Look what he has to say about Western Europe. Watch this. My, how busy our ancestors were so long ago civilizing the world. He's talking about Americans. It may have been 11,500 years ago. That is a very specific date. Why? Because we know a great amount of water was released in the United States, creating the Laurentine Seaway all the way down, basically from the Rocky Mountains, east of the Rocky Mountains. They would have been even underwater. Rocky Mountains, all the way to Tennessee is where the next you would have seen some land. But from Tennessee south to Florida, from Virginia on down, you dig what I'm talking about? You know, parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, all that shit was underwater. Basically, Michigan and the Midwest was above water, and some of the East Coast up to Virginia, but everything below that was all underwater down to the Mediterranean. So where did the people go? That happens 9,500 BC or 11,500 years ago, right at the end of the Younger Dryas. Interesting. It may have been 11,500 years ago or even much further back in time. The story of Atlantis does suggest, in a way, that the first Atlanteans possibly showed up in the Mediterranean Sea region long before 11,500 years ago. Well, once you really know what's really going on and what they're trying to apply to Atlantis is actually Pan, you can throw a 10,000 on that. As a matter of fact, you can throw 11,000 years on that, and you just out of the Great Deluge. Remember, it's 22,553. You just have been 50 years out of the deluge. Think about it. That's the time they look at. That's the time they think they talking about. But they're actually talking about 11,500 years ago. Younger Dryas. Two different glacial maximums. But nonetheless, ways to lock in on time for fact. Right? This is why I use it in the theory of rational carbon dating. You dig what I'm talking about? Let me see if I can throw something behind this real quick while we just learn this, because I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. But I'm going to throw a little beat on real quick. See if I can get some Brian Yog up in here. Or let me see who I got up in here. Let's go. All right, let me blow this up. How busy our ancestors were so long ago civilizing the world. It may have been 11,500 years ago or even much further back in time. The story of Atlantis does suggest, in a way, that the first Atlanteans possibly showed up in the Mediterranean Sea region long before 11,500 years ago. When the first 11,500 years ago, when the first you be just making it up, Cosmon. You be just making it up. This why they brown. Right? Think about it. Even use the Owaspy, right? They get off in Africa, India, Asia, America, Japan. How they get brown in Europe? Hmm? Right? He just laying down his idea for it. When the first Algonquins arrived at the present location of Western Europe, huh? These would have been Ions. Early Ions. No, these at this time, no, they would have been fully Anguilles, Algonquins, niggas too. Anyways, it may have been. He's just laying down his 1-2 step. It may have been possible that North Africa was settled by Algonquins first. Shout out to my young homie. He gave me the, the inter-Africa theory, which makes sense, right? It would explain why it has so much genetic diversity, because the most people went into it, not came out of it. That wouldn't make sense, right? It may have been possible that the North African was settled by the Algonquins first, yet I will start in Western Europe to begin with, then include the rest of all Europe, as I believe the Algonquins settled all of Europe. Great Britain was back during those days part of the continent of Europe. Owaspy say the same thing too. Owaspy show it on the map. Europe connected to the continent. Great Britain connected to the continent. Huh? Because the ocean during those times was much lower than it is today, apparently. The location of Great Britain is to many Atlantean believers the actual location where the Atlanteans originated. And they believe it is from Great Britain that the Atlanteans eventually spread out into Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Yet Atlantis was actually located much further westward along the eastern coastline of Canada and the United States. I don't be making it up. Let me drop this. I'm gonna drop this in the chat so everybody can read this all on their own. Don't be saying Cosmo, man. He just be capping. He don't be sharing no info. No, we give it all away. I don't want to hold on to nothing. It's not what I'm saying. But what if? What if? Let me see. Something real quick.
Creator gang gang.
Let's go and get it started. Let's go and get it started. Create a gang, baby. Let's go and get it started. Started. Let's go and get it started. Let's go and get it started. Create a gang, baby. Let's go and get it started. Started.
Yeah, bronze on the beat. As always, I don't want you to believe nothing. I want you to know, man. When they show you facts, figures, axioms, and they stand on what they say, and they show you why, look into it. Maybe something to it. You dig what I'm saying? With that being said, man, we're just gonna rock on out. Breathe in. Let that light in. Cause I'm God's mind. And I'm mine.
Bronze.
Creator Gang Gang.
Bronze.